Yes, folks, it absolutely does look bleak, but not all is lost. We will run the math for you and give you some hope, but also, of course, be realistic here on Iowa Hawkeyes Live for the next hour with Corey Brada. You can, of course, join Corey on from the Hawkeye of the Storm on your favorite audio platform and also right here on YouTube. Hey, Corey, how you doing tonight?
Doing all right, Mark. I'm going to be anxious to kind of get some feedback from some fans now that we've had a few days to kind of compartmentalize what's happened. This is certainly the bleakest it's looked since beginning of the season, but there are reasons for optimism. I tweeted that out when you kind of previewed the show on Twitter earlier today, Mark, right before we went on, actually. The West is not lost. Kirk Ferentz was asked about that today, and of course he kind of push that notion aside. We're focused on one game at a time, and I get that. But realistically, if Iowa can somehow figure out how to put points on the board, which I have no reason to think they're going to, Mark. I mean, I really don't. I don't know. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I really have no reason to think this offense will get figured out. But if it somehow does, they don't have murderers row in front of them. This should be a pretty comfortable win this Saturday, and we can talk about it. Mark, you're not so sure on it. Certainly, the numbers, this rivalry, have not been kind to Iowa, specifically Kirk. But again, this is a different Northwestern team. I would think Iowa will take care of it. Again, we can talk more about it, but it's just not a real difficult schedule. They don't have another top 25 team left. Of course, for Iowa to win the West, Wisconsin will have to lose, which very well could happen. They play the battle for the axe. Isn't it the battle for the axe? No, the battle for is it the axe? I don't
There
even
are
know my
so many,
rivalries.
but we've got Minnesota, Wisconsin's Paul Bunyan's axe.
Right, Paul Bunyan's axe. So that one, of course, if you're an Iowa fan at this point, you've got to win out. You got to win your last 4 games, which are Northwestern, Minnesota, Illinois, and Nebraska. You need Purdue to lose again, which they will. Purdue's going to lose again. They play Ohio State for 1. Purdue loses, then you get Minnesota to beat Wisconsin. Minnesota can beat Wisconsin, and of course, you're looking at a situation where Iowa can feasibly still make it to Indy. But again, they don't control their own destiny. They are dependent on Wisconsin to lose again and for Purdue to lose again. But again, I'm almost kind of writing in the Purdue loss. I don't have any. I just don't see how Purdue doesn't lose again. I guess the crazier things have happened, and certainly Wisconsin could win out. Mark, that's very possible. I would actually say there's a higher probability at this point that Iowa loses again than there is that Wisconsin loses again, because to me, these are two teams, first of all, heading in the opposite direction. Even though Wisconsin's passing game is still just okay, they've been able to run the ball consistently. They don't have the problems up front that Iowa has. Obviously, the defense is stellar. So we'll see. We've got time left. This ship can still be righted. I know that the playoff is out of play now completely, and so that's incredibly disappointing. I talked with Don over the weekend on our show about just accountability and expectations, and should fans feel guilty because they're pissed off at 6-2, and the answer to that question is no. Not when you're 6-0. Not when you have the stellar defense that Phil Parker has brought to the table each and every year. The number of turnovers that Iowa has, I don't even know where they rank in the country. They haven't had any turnovers these last 2 games, minus the pylon turnover against Purdue, and yet I think they're still probably right up at the top nationwide. So there is no reason to feel guilty about being disappointed and wanting better for this offense, and for being mad at Brian Ferentz, and for being mad at Kirk Ferentz. Right now, I can tell you from the Iowa Twitter sphere, Mark, that there's a lot of battling between fans about, I think the majority that I hear, the loudest, are that Brian needs to be fired. Okay, that's what I'm hearing the most of. But then there are a few of the other side, I shouldn't say other side, but kind of apologists for Brian who reasons, the offense wasn't good under O'Keefe. It wasn't good under Greg Davis. So is it really Brian? What's the commonality there? Of course, it'd be Kirk. And I understand that reasoning. But we're looking at now, and I haven't went back, and this is a project that I'll be doing before I record my show tomorrow, Mark. And that is, I want to compare just total offense over the course of Kirk's tenure. And I just want to see where it's headed, as we change coordinators. And of course, Iowa's only had, again, O'Keefe, Greg Davis, and Brian. I just have a feeling, and I hate to say it, maybe I shouldn't say this because I haven't looked at the data. I have a feeling it's went down consistently, as low as it may have been during the O'Keefe era. I think of 2009 was not a great offensive year, but a solid offensive year. 2002, 2004, even 2005. I just have a feeling, I mean, we haven't seen a good offensive year yet under Brian Ferentz. So that's kind of the debate right now. I told Don I'm not going to personally talk about what I think needs to happen with the staff at this point, because although I know there are a lot of changes happening nationwide, and some people are all for it, and Mark, you may be all for it as well, I don't personally believe that's what's best for this program. Not just because it's Brian and it's Kirk's son. I just don't think. I don't believe in that, at least at this point, of making a change at mid-season. You got 4 games left. Is it really going to help you? I mean, is this ship going to be righted if Kirk cans his son, which will never happen? But if that did happen, is the ship going to be righted? The answer to that question is no. It's either going to be righted or it's not. So all hope is not lost, Mark. There's a lot of storylines and a lot of pissed off fans, and that's okay. Mark, I can't hear you.
There we go. We had gone a few different directions there in regards to Iowa's schedule, its competitor schedules, the offense, and coaching as connected to the offense. So here are my thoughts. First of all, yes, 6-2 is the record, and 3-1 in the conference, correct? Yes. So 3-1 in the conference, or 3-2 in the conference. So the math is the math, but where they arrived versus had this been a loss to Indiana in week 1 and then picking up another Big Ten loss at some point, and there is so much expectation, anticipation, excitement, buildup when you win in the manner in which they did against the competition in which they did, culminated, of course, by beating a top 5 Penn State team at the time and being ranked as high as number 2 in the nation, and then 2 losses, rather than arriving at the same point in a different fashion. So the disappointment of the fan base is understandable. It's just more of an emotional roller coaster than it would be in a typical Iowa year, where you said, pick out your year. They're 6-2, they're 3-2 in the Big Ten at this point, and they have a reasonable chance of still winning the division, even though they're behind. How do you feel about that? Well, again, we've arrived at this point much differently than we have at other times during Kirk Ferentz's run at Iowa. I was asked by a caller last night that between Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota and their weekend games, in which they are all decided double-digit favorites, who I believed was the most vulnerable. And I stated Minnesota, even though I think they're playing arguably the best football, or near the best football of the 3, based on what their opponents shown to be capable of. Just the combination of Minnesota typically playing close to the vest, run-oriented football, not separating typically from the other team, much like Iowa and Wisconsin. They're all cut from the same cloth to a certain extent. That I thought Minnesota was the most vulnerable this weekend against Illinois. But of course, they're all 3 substantial favorites. As it pertains, Corey, to the offense, you know that I went on record, again, not speaking from a knowledge base that you possess of knowing the layers of offensive line depth, who's supposed to be good, who has experience, who does not, and through the various units on the offense. I was just going on probabilities and past track record, both as an offensive unit and otherwise. And you know what I had to say about the first few games was, no, this isn't good. This is not a good sign, but I would not be surprised if it gets corrected. Not that they become prolific, but that they become efficient and productive. Because, and I've been wrong. That I'm wrong. I was wrong in that statement, in that guesstimation of what this would turn out to be, because now we're 8 games deep, and sure, this offense should perform better. It can't perform much worse. But I got to tell you, on Saturday at noon, while you were of course hyper focused on the game, my number one television position was Michigan State. Number 2 was Iowa, Wisconsin. And number 3 was something else. And I always have 3, maybe 4 games on. But my attention span is only such. So I had the sound on the Michigan State game. But I am watching Iowa, Wisconsin front and center with no sound on like a 20-inch screen right in front of me. Actually, the one I'm looking at right now. And it just appeared as though, again, I tend to lose track of the game in regards to situational football. When I'm watching like that, it's a secondary game. But just the inability, number one, that struck me constantly was the inability of the offensive line to hold up in pass protection. Was just astonishing. It just looked like Spencer Petras was under siege constantly in that game.
Offensive line's terrible. It's terrible. It was, but let's remember, it was terrible in 19. We've had conversations about 2019, and I think it's okay to bring that up because that was a different O-line coach. Some people have went out and said it's this Barnett fella from the MAC. No, it's got nothing to do with Barnett. He's a guy who, first of all, has only been the coach here for 8 games. A lot of some of the issues are strength. So, people have pointed, well, Chris Doyle left. That's got to be it. Some of it's technique. Kirk Ferentz is an O-line coach. He was asked today, are you spending more time with the O-line? And he said, no, not any more than normal. I mean, I know that some people are going to come to Kirk's defense when I say this because they're going to say, well, you know nothing about football, Corey, and Kirk's been here 23 years, and that's very much true. But that's ridiculous. The O-line is the weakest unit. Kirk ought to be working with that unit every single day. He's got no loyalty to. I mean, the fact that this, again, someone who's from the outside, Mark, who watches an Iowa game and can perceive that the O-line is the weakness, that's really sad. It's not us Iowa fans who are used to strong O-lines saying that. It's an outsider who's saying that. So that's really sad. And you're absolutely right. Now, Wisconsin, let's give some credit where credit is due. Everybody has a hard time blocking that 3-4 front. There's no question about it. They're one of the best defenses in the country. I've been saying that all year long. A lot of fans, I remember it might have been after the Maryland game when we did like our 3-hour post-game show until like 2 a.m. We had Iowa fans writing off Wisconsin. That's not, Wisconsin sucks. They can't score. And I said, look here, that may be true. Their offense still isn't great. But here's the deal. I said, just like Iowa's defense is going to keep them in every game, Wisconsin's defense, I don't care how bad their offense is, it's going to keep them in every game unless Mertz does what he did against Notre Dame and starts throwing picks. And so late in the game on Saturday, I said the same thing. The only guy that's going to get Iowa back in this game is Graham Mertz. And I give the kid credit. He played a clean game. He didn't throw a whole lot, right? He did, it wasn't 8 throws like he did against Purdue.
I think it was 22.
I think that's high, Mark. Maybe it is. Maybe it is 22.
I think he was 11 of 22. I typically remember numbers if I come across them, and I try to review most of the box scores across the country. That's what's stuck in my brain. 11 of 22. I don't remember the yardage. Or probably right around 100 yards. 104? No, that's Braylon Allen, I think, ran for 104.
Well, it wasn't much over 100. He was hovering around 100 passing yards. So the point is, if he avoids picks between Allen and Malusi, I'll tell you this right now, and this is an Iowa podcast. I said this after the game. Actually, you know what? I said this. I didn't even say this on the air. I said this to Don during a phone call. I said, the one team in this division that can beat Ohio State? It's not Iowa. It's Wisconsin. Because I believe Wisconsin may be the only defense that can contain Ohio State, and Ohio State's defense may not be able to stop the Wisconsin run. So I'm not predicting an upset in the title game, but if Wisconsin ends up winning the division, which I think I'd give them. I honestly, right now, Mark, I'd say they're the favorites. I don't care if Minnesota's ahead in the race. They're the favorites right now, given the schedule, given how they're playing. Tiebreaker, obviously, they've already beaten Purdue and Iowa. I think they would have a shot against Ohio State. Not saying they'd win. They may get blown out if Mertz, self-destructs like he sometimes does. So I got to give Wisconsin a lot of credit. They did what they do. There were a couple publications after the game that quoted some Wisconsin players as saying, we saw Iowa lining up, and basically every time we knew exactly what play they were running. And that is such an indictment on Kirk. And you could say, well, Kirk made these, because somebody asked him that today during his media availability. This is what these players said, Kirk. What's your response? And Kirk basically said, well, that's their defense is just really good. I'm sure they knew what almost every team they've played was doing. And that's just a load of bull. That it's just such a lame excuse. I'll give you one example why. And this is really my biggest disappointment coming out of that game on Saturday. Don Patterson, who provides analytics to Kirk, right? That was the one thing he said to Kirk before the game. He said, Kirk, Wisconsin, the one analytic that is 100% in their 7 games up until this point, first quarter scoring. They win the first quarter, they're 4-0. They lose the first quarter, they're 3-0. So 0-3. You've got to win the first quarter. Now, Don wasn't able to watch the game live. He went back to Western Illinois for Western Illinois State, but he watched it later. So I texted him on Saturday night. I said, have you heard the results of the game? And he said, heard the results, but he said, I got to ask you, did we even try to take a shot? I said, well, if we did, I missed it. And, he said, well, this win was predicated on Iowa getting off to a quick start. Well, I said, does this quantify as a quick start? 0 first downs in the first quarter, 1 first down in the first half, 20-0 at halftime. Is that a quick start, Mark? I mean, and let's be honest, if Iowa was taking shots and Wisconsin was just getting to the quarterback and, picking off Petras, that'd be one thing. We weren't looking downfield, Mark. There were no shots downfield. There were no looks. I've heard people this week say, well, I think we were trying to take shots, but they just weren't there because Wisconsin was getting back. Now, you watch the game back. I'll give you a perfect example. This was third quarter, I believe. Don and I had this conversation as well. 2nd and 1. Keep in mind, Iowa had 1 first down in the entire first half. So I can, 2nd and 1 is nothing to an average team, but 2nd and 1 for an Iowa fan, that's like, I don't even know how to describe the jubilation when you see 2nd and 1 on the screen. But you've got 2nd and 1, and Don's a former OC, and I asked him, I said, is 2nd and 1 almost better? It's better than first down, right? And he said, absolutely. Absolutely. And he described how some teams are known for taking advantage of waste downs and some are not. And of course, you don't want to take advantage of a waste down against, Miami, Ohio, because you want to be able to throw that into, you don't want to have that on tape for Wisconsin to look at. But Iowa gets up there. It's their first waste down of the game, and they run the football for like 2 yards for first down. And to me, that was just the epitome of no confidence at all, no willingness to break tendencies. And that was my big key going in. And certainly I stole a little bit of that from Don Patterson himself. Iowa they're not going to come up and beat Wisconsin at their own game. They had to break tendencies. And once again, Kirk and Brian, whoever you want to blame, they were not willing to do that. They were not willing to try. And for that, this loss is on the coaches. It's not on Petras. It's not on the O-line. This loss is on the coaches.
No confidence in 2 directions. No confidence to be able to take the shot and have a reasonable expectation of connecting. And we know that when you take a shot and are looking, let's say, past 25 yards, that you are playing in a sense the percentages overall, but not the percentages for that particular play, because the percentages of success are 30% or something like that. But you are sending a message to the defense. You are setting up for later in the game. You are obviously the gain, the reward is high on the risk, whether that's a pass completion or interference. But common sense and the analytics will tell you that you cannot win against a Wisconsin at 3 to 5 yards a clip for 75 yards. It's just not going to happen. So it's the lack of confidence that they can make the shot work. And then it's a lack of confidence that if they miss on the shot, that on 3rd and 1, they can pick up the first down.
Yeah.
And even get the yard that they need against a Wisconsin defense that's just, I think the stats were 0.8 yards per rush. And of course that includes sacks. So it's
Sure.
a skewed statistic in college football. Unfortunately, I don't like it, but certainly gives great indication.
And Mark, we know I can sit here and you can sit here and we can say that's a sign of lack of confidence in the offense. It also might just be a sign of lack of competency in play calling. I mean, total lack of competency, because this isn't the only situation. It's not just, Iowa doesn't take advantage of waste downs. That's our complaint. I mean, they came out of the game, first play from scrimmage, Charlie Jones run back. Charlie Jones and Torrey Taylor, those guys deserve to be on a good offense because, man, they put Iowa in tremendous position, as does the defense. But Iowa has one of the best special teams units in the country, one of the best defensive units in the country. It's being wasted. But anyways, so Charlie Jones returns it to near midfield, right? First play of the game. Iowa comes out on 1st and 10 in empty. No backs in the backfield. Petrus back there with nobody back there on 1st and 10. Might have been the dumbest call I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, what is the reasoning to come back there and empty? And Don and I talked about it in our show. It just makes absolutely zero sense. It's frustrating because it's almost like Brian's got a bag of possible options and he's just drawing, and he just happens to be a guy without very good odds at drawing something good, because, man, you almost feel like you or I could make better decisions in a situation like that. Iowa shouldn't ever be an empty, by the way, Mark, unless it's 3rd and long, ever. I don't care if it's against anybody, but let alone Wisconsin.
And coming out in empty is even amplified even more because of your lack of mobility at quarterback.
Right, yeah. If you can come out as empty if you're Penn State, because Clifford's a threat to run. The one team, I mean, there's so many that's what's frustrating about it, Mark. There are so many reasons not to do what Brian does, and yet he still does it. There are so many reasons not to run the fullback twice on 3rd and 2 and 4th and 1. I mean, first of all, you didn't get Wisconsin's front. I mean, it was a 9-man front, first of all. We're swinging to a different play. I know I'm jumping all over the place, but 3rd down is a huge possession because Iowa had cut the lead to 20-7, as you know, Mark. It was 3rd and 2 in Wisconsin territory. Another time, and Don is actually one that brought this up initially, take a shot on 3rd and 2. You need points here, and you're struggling to get a yard or two on the ground game anywhere, and now you're going up against a 9-man front, and you run the fullback on 3rd and 2, and you would think that Iowa would have learned from the Purdue game that you don't run the same short yardage play twice in a row where you're reliant on an official giving you a spot to advance the chains. And even then, if you advance the chains, like Don said, you're having problems getting first downs anyway. So whoop-de-doo, you got another first down. Now you got to go 10 more yards to get to the third. I mean, the way Iowa's playing football right now is not winning football. We've been saying it for years that Iowa plays not to lose, but right now they're really playing not to lose, and they're losing doing it. But 3rd and 2, you take a shot. They don't. They run the fullback for a yard. They go into a timeout, and they come out, and they run the fullback again. And I admitted during the play, I said, I don't know what to call here. I wouldn't know what to call in 4th and 1 because I didn't have faith in. Typically, I have faith in the quarterback sneak and fullback dive at Iowa. It's actually been two of the higher percentage run plays in Iowa's playbook. But in that situation, I don't know. But see, I don't get paid $700-some thousand like Brian Ferentz does a year to make those calls. And I know there's some coach speak. I brought up what Kirk said earlier today. Another comment, I want to address this comment on the screen here, Mark, about our chances of seeing Padilla. Kirk was asked after the game on Saturday, was Padilla coming in there late? Was that something that you saw because you wanted to see what he could do, or was it just to protect Petrus? And he right away downplayed the idea that there's any quarterback controversy. No, we just wanted to protect Spencer's health. First thought there is, well, that's got to make Alex Padilla feel really good. I mean, the last play that Spencer was in there, I don't know if you saw this, Mark, but that might have been the most of all the maddening plays and calls in that game on Saturday, that might have been the one where I almost felt like turning the television off, because it's like it's fourth and I think it was like 4th and 11 or 4th and 12, and Petrus, he had, of course, there was pressure all game, but it wasn't like he was going to get decked. He throws the ball 20 feet out of bounds on 4th and 11. I mean, on what planet does that make sense? On what planet? I mean, I'd rather throw. We had a listener brought this up. You'd rather throw the ball downfield and get a pick. You'd actually be the equivalent of a punt. Throw the ball down the field. Don't throw it out of bounds. But and I'm not here to rip Spencer, because I think I'm a firm believer, especially at Iowa, your quarterback is a product of your coach. Very much so. He's a product of your coach. And so, in answer to this question from Springtime 0502, I do want to see Padilla. I don't want to see Spencer yanked. I want to see Padilla for at least a series or a drive. Okay, for a couple of reasons. A, he's mobile, and I know people have brought that up in the past, and I've downplayed it. But the reason I'm more interested in that conversation now is because these offensive line problems are not going away. They are not going away this season. So you've got to figure out a B or a C plan, and maybe that's mix in Padilla, the threat of somebody who can escape. We saw him come in late, and I know maybe some of Wisconsin's backups were in the game at this point, but he made a nice play. The pocket broke down. He flushed left and made a nice throw across his body down the field to Sam Laporta. That was a good throw. Now, it was just one play. And if here's the one problem with yanking Spencer is it damages a quarterback's psyche. So I would have a conversation. If I was the OC, I'd have a conversation with Spencer. I'd say, look, Spencer, this ain't your fault. We have a very subpar offensive line. Our guys you can make all the excuses for the line to Spencer that you need to make, even though I don't believe those excuses are totally valid, but you can make those to Spencer. We need a guy who's mobile. You're not getting yanked, but we're going to see what Alex can do here and there. This is the North. I mean, if you lose on the road to Northwestern, who cares anyway? I mean, at this point, does it really matter? If you're struggling to beat Northwestern with Spencer, does it really matter if you squeak by 20-17? Give Alex Padilla a shot. I'm all for that right now. I'm not all for Deuce Hogan because the guy's the third quarterback on the depth chart, but I'm all for that right now. So, I can see where fans are coming from wanting to see Padilla this week.
So between Padilla and you just mentioned the third string quarterback, was that Hogan?
Deuce Hogan, yep.
Yes. Is there excitement about those two players as prospects, or they're just second and third guys?
Everybody loved Deuce Hogan when he got here because he was a very outspoken kid on social media. There's a lot of recruiting hype around him out of Texas. And nobody ever cared. Nobody ever talks about Padilla. Now, Padilla was offered by Georgia for what it's worth. So he was a decently touted kid as well. But for some reason, Deuce Hogan, there's this, I keep hearing this mantra, and it's really kind of annoying because it's a third string quarterback at Iowa. We got to let the deuce loose. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, the guy's a third string quarterback.
It rhymes.
Right. It's kind of like back when Mark Wiseman was Iowa's running back, and everybody, Wiseman for Heisman, give me a break. Anyways, Deuce Hogan's not unless
Mark Wiseman. Wow.
You remember Mark
Wiseman? A long time since I remember. Yeah, I do.
Fullback, right? Fullback out of Air Force. Unless something crazy were to happen, Alex Padilla is the only guy that's going to see the field in addition to Spencer. I told Don, I have no reason to think Kirk's going to play him. And Kirk said that today. He said, I believe he said, now I don't want to misquote Kirk, but I believe Kirk said, we haven't even thought about it. We haven't even thought about it. I mean, dear God, if you want to lose a fan base.
Okay, so when Kirk makes a statement like that, and I'm going to also address a statement that you made of his earlier, I'm going to interpret it one of two ways. So when he makes a statement that they haven't even thought about using the backup quarterback, yes, like you, I think it's ridiculous if that's reality. If it's just not even on their radar to even consider it. Now, if he is trying to, in a subtle way, give a vote of confidence to Spencer Petrus, I can understand that.
Right.
Just like when he makes the comment, hey, in response to the question, have you looked at the offensive line? Have you given them more attention? Because that's your area of expertise and there's an obvious need there. And he says no. So again, I think that's ridiculous, because if you are, let's say, it doesn't even matter the industry, if you are a division manager of 5 departments and 4 of them are humming along and are running like clockwork and one is struggling mightily, and especially if that's your baby, if that's your area of expertise in which you were coming up through the ranks, well, obviously you look into that situation and see if you can offer advice and oversight and figure out and help the person in charge with what's going on. Of course you do that. So I wonder if he's also stating, in a sense, that I don't want to make this area look bad, don't want the offensive line coach to look bad. I'm just basically giving a vote of confidence or stating to everyone, he knows what he's doing. He's doing a good job. I trust him.
Yeah, and I understand that. There is such a thing as coach speak, and like you said, the comment about Padilla could very well be a vote of confidence for Spencer, and certainly the comment about working with the offensive line could be trying to give a vote of confidence to George Barnett. I understand that. But again, you're also talking about, I'm not saying he should care, but he should. I mean, he should care what the fan base is saying to a degree, because there's always going to be the fans that are wishy-washy and fair weather fans, but those are not things necessarily you want to hear. And I don't think, I've always heard, often head coaches aren't there to micromanage position coaches, and I understand that. But I think there is a way to, even if he were to have said that publicly, not that he has to, I would have liked to have heard him say it publicly, but if he were to answer that question and say, I'm helping out George as much as I can, he's got his hands full. There's a way to couch that to where you're not trying to undermine what he's doing or show a lack of confidence in what he's doing, because if that's the one position group that is qualified, Kirk is qualified to come in and help, not to micromanage, but to help, it's the offensive line. He's an offensive line coach. So, and maybe that's happening, but like you said, Mark, if there's something struggling and your head coach happens to be an expert in that field, I would think George Barnett would be asking for that help. It's his first year on the job, and it's the sore spot of this team. So, the offensive line needs a lot. Kirk did say today as well that he's not really looking at any other changes. Like, I know people have asked, where's David Cobb? He's a 4-star recruit this year, tackle that was kind of more widely hyped than Connor Colby, and now Colby's number 1 on the depth chart at right guard. David Cobb was hurt earlier in the year, so maybe he's behind. But basically, Kirk has dispelled the notion of Iowa mixing in anybody else, because they've already got a line rotating of at least, I'd have to count it up, it's probably at 8 guys. Jack Plum, I believe, started against Wisconsin at right tackle, but it had been Nick DeYoung. Neither guy are playing well. And that's the other thing. I tweeted about this earlier in the week as well. I've heard some pundits saying, you got to realize that Iowa, look at all these young players on Iowa's roster. And one of them brought up the fact that, I believe is it Justin Britt, for example, is a sophomore. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's a 3rd-year guy. What are we looking for here? There's got to be, again, why are we youth is a factor. There's no question. Richmond's a redshirt freshman. You've got DeYoung. I believe he's a 3rd-year sophomore. Tyler Linderbaum's playing great. We get that. He's an upperclassman. But Ince is an upperclassman. Britt is a 3rd-year guy. Colby's a true freshman. I understand that. But Jack Plum, he's an upperclassman. That narrative is weak. That narrative is weak. You can always say, well, the youth takes time to develop. My question is, why aren't the older guys developed? The same question I had in 2019. Not to call the Paulson twins out, but those happened to be the guards at the time. And it wasn't just Levi and Landon Paulson, but Ince was a young guy at the time. And there were some other guards. I think Cole Banwart went down with a big injury that year, so that was a factor. But why aren't these older guys ready? That's the question people need to be asking. You don't need to be dogging on DeYoung and Richmond and Colby. No, it's why aren't the older guys ready? And I don't even dog on them. I dog on again, this comes back to coaching and development. And we can point our fingers at Chris Doyle leaving or, Brian Ferentz or Kirk. It lies somewhere with the coaching staff, Mark. And that's only fair. Hayden Fry was a perfect example of someone who would be accountable and would say, look, my position coach has got to coach better and I got to coach better. And he would say that publicly. I don't often hear Kirk say that. I'm not saying he's not accountable in the locker room. I would personally, it's just me, I would like to hear Kirk, now it's, you could say it's too late because he should have done it the last 2 weeks, in my opinion. Come up after the game and said, we've got to coach better. George Barnett's got to coach better. My son has to coach better. I saw somebody put up in the chat, and I have no way to actually prove these are correct, but we had a Iowa listener pop up the rankings for Iowa's offense, and I noticed that all of them are ranked in the 90s or higher over the course of Brian Ferentz's tenure. You can say that I've heard people, Kirk's got his fingers on the offense. He's not allowing Brian to do what he wants to do. If that's the case, then maybe they should both go. If that's the case, because that's ridiculous. This is a fifth-year coordinator. If he's not running the offense by now, what the heck are we doing? I mean, and it'd be different if you have a head coach who was kind of like Hayden Fry, who was a very innovative offensive mind, but Kirk is just not that way. So anyways, enough with my ranting for the moment, Mark.
Corey, my guess is going to be when you do your review of the offensive metrics over Kirk Ferentz's stay at Iowa, that maybe the numbers themselves won't change much over the course of his tenure, but the rest of college football has changed, meaning a 400-yard offensive game 20 years ago is much different than a 400-yard offensive game today. So my guess, and this is just a guess, is that Iowa's productivity on offense hasn't changed much in regards to the number of points and yards in production, but relative to the contemporary style of play and what's expected out of a productive offense today versus 2002 is much different, and that's where it's lagged behind.
And that's why I want to look at rankings. Yeah. Where are they ranked? Because it's all relative to the year.
Sure.
And so that's what I'll look at. And I just want to thank our super chat here from Get Business Credit, as well as from Spaghetti Factory. I see.
Yeah, let's pick up a couple of these super chat contributions. Just want to read these off, and then also remind everyone that with about 100 people on the line, please subscribe to our Iowa channel. So here's the deal. Corey in particular is posting some tremendous content to the Iowa channel on a regular basis. And if you're not familiar, the postgame show involves former coach Don Patterson, who's an analyst currently for the Iowa coaching staff and former coach. And the insight, the analysis, as you can imagine from a long time, coach at that level is tremendous, and Corey's analysis as well. So please join us on the Iowa channel. Please subscribe there. And I will tell everyone that enjoys what we do here at the Voice of College Football overall, regardless of who you root for, that if you want us to continue to grow here at the Voice of College Football, even if you are not an Iowa fan, this is my call for action. Please subscribe to the Iowa channel because it is key to YouTube analytics to push us past the 1,000 subscriber mark. And I will tell you, if for whatever reason you don't want to be subscribed to too many channels, get us past the 1,000 mark comfortably, and then you can unsubscribe if you'd like. But please get us to the 1,000 mark, first and foremost for the great content, but also if you want to help us build the overall platform. So yes, Get Business Credit. Hi, Mark. Hope all is well. Showing support. Rankings come out at 7, right? So here's another plug right here. If you want to watch the unveiling of the college football rankings, which won't be nearly as enjoyable for the Iowa fans as it could have been 2 weeks ago, but nonetheless, we will be doing a little watch party here at the Voice of College Football on the main channel during the playoff unveiling, the rankings unveiling, I should call it. And then we'll open up the phone lines to take your calls. Would also like to catch up with this other super chat if I can find it.
I've got it here, Mark.
There we go. Yeah, Spaghetti Factory. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. Iowa needs a bell cow back. And the tight end should be the focal point of the passing attack. Yes. Thank you so much for the contribution there.
They're gonna see some bell cow back this week because Ivory Kelly-Martin's out. It was interesting. I do want to address this real quick, Mark. You saw the fumble. You probably saw the fumble at Iowa's own 1. And, of course, that's Ivory Kelly-Martin, who's had fumbling issues all season. And Kirk has put trust in the guy. He's a captain. He's a senior leader on this team. He's one of Iowa's 2 best gunners on special teams. He's really helped this team a lot, but his ball security continues to be an issue. So how can you continue to play? How can you continue to give him the ball on offense? I just don't think you can. So he fumbles. Gavin Williams comes in for him. I didn't see Kelly-Martin go down with an injury. Well, we got an email. I say we. I was included in this email just on the press release list. And we don't normally get updates about injuries through these emails, so I thought it was a little bit odd. I'm not going to read into it, I guess, any more than I need to. But they released the depth chart, and then there was a note in the depth chart that Kelly-Martin was not on the depth chart due to injury. So I'm not sure why include that. Because, again, Riley Moss, there was no note on an email when Riley Moss went down that said this is due to injury. So, again, maybe that's Ferentz trying to – I'm sure that's probably Ferentz trying to keep Kelly-Martin's head up. And I'm not saying that the injury's fake, but just to give him the impression that, hey, we still have confidence in you. I know I sure don't have confidence in the kid. As far as running the football offensively, seems like a great kid, seems like a nice kid. He's a strong runner, but you've got to protect the football. And I'm sure he understands that, and he's disappointed in himself. So we're going to see Gavin Williams this week. I've heard some criticism about Tyler Goodson. Gary comments about Goodson in Wildcat. Goodson's been struggling a bit behind a poor offensive line. He gets in the habit of kind of pitter-pattering and not hitting holes as quick as he could. But again, man, it's hard to really judge him. There was a lot of hype about him going to the NFL this year. I don't know if that hype is still there. I have no idea. He's not going to be a top 3 round draft pick, Mark. We're going to see Gavin Williams this Saturday. And I'm not saying it's because Goodson's not performing well, but in addition to the Kelly-Martin injury, we always see 2 backs at Iowa. You don't see Iowa typically, the exception being, I think, was it 2015 when Jordan Canzeri had like 40 runs against Illinois. That's not what Iowa does. So I'm sure we'll see some Gavin, maybe even some LaShawn Williams this week. It is something that Iowa fans have talked about possibly would help is having that bell cow LaShawn Daniels type, or we mentioned Mark Wiseman. Certainly, he's not quite big as Mark was, but to me, at some point you got to start trying different things. Not that I think that Iowa will extensively, but at some point you've got to do something different.
When I see people struggling with certain answers or names from the past, I like to jump in. That would be Chad Hennings, Christopher, Dallas Cowboys linebacker who played at Air Force. Of course, many comments coming in about the offensive play calling in particular. So this Northwestern game, I've heard that Iowa's a 12-point favorite. I've not looked up the line myself. It's on the road, correct?
It is. Yeah, it's a night game,
it's a night game.
It's kind of ridiculous, but anyways, it's a night game for a bad West team.
Probably on the Big Ten Network.
It is.
Okay.
It's not ABC. It's not ABC. If you're wondering that.
So, yeah, I am going to find it unless Iowa goes back to its early season formula of a lot of point production on defense and special teams. This may be a 21-10 win.
Well, if it's 21-10 win, count me out. I'm not saying I'm going to turn the TV off and not be the post game, but count me out for that. Ain't nobody want to see that. And I've mentioned this a couple times now after the game on Saturday. Iowa needs to beat Northwestern by 30 to 40 points for me to be happy. And maybe that's asking way, way, way too much. But the only way I can be happy, because I mean, you win 21 to 10. Is there going to be any more confidence in this team and this offense heading into Minnesota if you do that? There's not going to be that. That doesn't change a thing. One thing we didn't talk about, and I think about this primarily because we've shifted our attention to Northwestern. And I remember in 2018, Tyrone Tracy making a big touchdown play against Northwestern. Is Tyrone Tracy's brother, and I've heard his other brother did the same thing. I haven't validated that, but I saw at least one tweet from his brother, who's I guess also a D1 football player somewhere, basically went on social media after the game on Saturday, ripping Iowa's coaching staff for not getting Tyrone Tracy the ball more. I understand the frustration. Couple things that doesn't help anything. First of all, that's not the way you handle a situation, clearly. So it's not going to help Tyrone get the ball more. I recall 2018 when Noah Fant wasn't getting the ball, which for reasons I'll never figure out, but he wasn't getting the ball, and his brother went on social media, and I think it only made things worse. But Tracy's brother does that. The other part about it is he's not playing well. Like, he's dropped a lot of passes that have come his way. And I get it. His targets are not as high as he'd like, but Don always talks about he doesn't look at your percentage caught. He looks at your percentage dropped, because then they're much more finite numbers and they become much more significant. And that's how he always looked at it as a coach. So, I think it would be great to see a breakout game. I have no reason to think we're going to get one. I made a prediction before the Wisconsin game that I thought we'd see a lot of targets to Keegan Johnson. I guess I got that one right. I think he led the team in targets on Saturday. At least it felt like he did. He had a beautiful reverse against Wisconsin for 12 yards, which is one of Iowa's like 4 first downs in the game. But I made this proclamation on Saturday. I believe Keegan Johnson may be the best skill position player on this team. And that says a lot because Tyler Gritson's really good. I mean, I think he put a really good line in front of Tyler. We saw what he did last year in a COVID-shortened year. I think Keegan Johnson's right there with him. And man, the kid's a true freshman. So there's reasons to be happy about him. And certainly Arlen Bruce has shown himself to be a quality wide receiver as a true freshman as well. But yeah, I do think Tracy getting going this week would be huge. They just got to figure out a way. I've heard, I haven't really watched much Northwestern football, Mark. I'm sure you haven't stayed up, the wee hours of the morning watching this team, but I've heard their defense is improving over the last few weeks. Probably not good timing for Iowa's putrid offensive line.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that certainly they got blown out this past weekend against Minnesota, but it was a slow grind. It wasn't 28-0 out of the gate. It took time. It was 20-7 third quarter, a couple more touchdowns. Same thing against Michigan. They were within 10-7 at half. They played a really good half at Michigan before they got blown out 33-7. So they're having similar offensive woes and challenges there, as is being pointed out by D-Rock, the Rod Farva is pointing out that Iowa's 114th in the nation in plays of 20-plus yards, and D-Rock Irish posted the stats similar to that about Northwestern's offense. Yeah.
Yes, and I believe, I know it's Rutgers, but they did hold Rutgers they were holding them to like 7 or something like that.
Yes, 21-7.
So, I mean, again, I know it's Rutgers, but Rutgers has had a couple. Didn't they win who'd they beat this past week?
Illinois.
Yeah. So, I mean, any win's a good win right now for Pat Fitzgerald and that team, but that shows maybe some progression defensively. And, I'm old enough to remember some games in the mid-2000s that got pretty ugly for Northwestern teams that weren't all that good. I mean, like the Dan Persa years. Were those good teams, Mark?
No.
But Iowa found ways to lose to those teams and struggle on, especially in Evanston. And I don't think it's supposed to be rainy, but you have those what do they call the lake showers there? It can get ugly out there.
The lake effect.
Lake effect, right? Lake effect rain. So
Dan Persa, I'm guessing 2008, 9, 10, that range.
Yeah, it sounds
right.
Am I
remembering
yeah.
correctly there?
Well, yeah. Maybe bump him up a year, or bump him up a year. I think he was maybe 9, 10, 11, something like that.
8, 9, 10, 11.
Okay, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Well, he played in 9, 10, 11. Yep.
Yeah, because I remember going to a Iowa Northwestern game, and I think it was 11, and he was just running all over the field. I think Iowa won that game, but if I recall, they lost there in 2010. And they lost at home in 9, correct?
I don't have it in front of me. I just have Dan Purse's numbers in front of me, which he had 2 really fine seasons, 15-4 TD to pick ratio and 17-7. I remember one of those teams, I believe it would have been in 2009 or 10, that they played an epic overtime game with Auburn in the Outback Bowl.
I do vaguely remember that as well. And, of course, the 9 game was talk about stupid play calling. Ken O'Keefe runs Stanzi on the bootleg in the end zone, and it breaks his leg, and there goes Iowa's hopes of a championship. So that was against Northwestern. They ended up losing that game. And then I do think they lost on the road at Northwestern in 10. I believe that was the game where Iowa just could not contain Persa. And at the time, Iowa didn't really deploy more than maybe 5 or 6 defensive linemen. And now they typically try to get like 8 or 9 that they're happy with, which I love. I love that about Phil Parker's defenses. Which, by the way, that brings up a good point. Deontay Craig, it sounds like he will be back this week. He's been missing on that defensive line. That may help, because the defensive line, we haven't talked about that, Mark. Defensive line has not been good for Iowa either. They're not getting any pressure on quarterbacks. Those stunt plays that were working earlier in the year, other teams have those on tape now. Iowa doesn't have an AJ Epinesa, Anthony Nelson, Drew Ott to get around a defensive line or offensive line or get through it. So that'll be good to have Craig back. I don't know if it's going to be a game changer. Moss and Roberts are both out, it sounds like, at least doubtful. Have not practiced at full speed. I think Iowa's pretty much healthy everywhere else. So Jamari Harris will get the start again at the other cornerback spot. I heard some speculation on social media, or was it a message board this week, that Matt Hankins was benched at some point late in the game, and I don't think that's true. I'd have to go back and look at the tape. It might have just been maybe he got banged up, dinged up, or maybe they just pulled him because the game was over. I don't know. I guess I never noticed it. Xavier Williams out of UNI, I guess, came in for him. Talk about a disappointment. We talk about Tracy. Xavier Williams transferring here from Northern Iowa, where he was a star, and I get it's a totally different level, but I think people expected him to play. Hasn't seen the field hardly at all. He's playing on special teams. So it'd be nice to see Xavier get some time. Certainly you don't want Hankins to be struggling or to be injured. But anyways, they're getting healthier now. Hopefully you get back Moss at some point soon, but the knee, whatever it is with his knee, is obviously lingering from that Penn State game.
You can catch our picks on Patreon. So Corey's part of our 20 media members that we get a 12-pack from of picks each and every week. I expanded beyond that. I pick all the top 25 games, plus some other ones I like to add on there. 13-5 against the spread last week, 107-69 for the year. So please join myself and others there on Patreon at $5 a month. Well worth your while. If you like to throw a couple bucks at the game, 107-69, if you do the math, would work out pretty nicely for you.
Mark, I have a question real quick.
Yes.
Maybe you can figure this for me real quick. Do you know what I was against the spread last week? I really don't, but I'm just curious as to what I was against the spread.
I don't. I added up everybody's records, and then I deleted the results from last week.
I gotcha. I'll have to look, because I was, we had that conversation about picking, because my record was up to the midpoint of the season was really good straight up, but not great against the spread. And again, I'm relatively speaking in comparison to other people's picks, but I think I was better against the spread this past week. I don't know that I was 13-5, but I might have been giving you a run for your money this past week.
Well, we do the 12 pack, the 12 games. So I think I was 9-3 in those 12. That sounds familiar. You going 9-3. That sounds familiar. That you may have gone 9-3 as well.
Trying to turn the numbers back. So what's the explain to me, what's the 13-5?
That's my record against the spread.
What's the 9-3?
So on the sheet that you receive with the rest of the media, there's only spots 12. For 12 games. So it worked out. Okay, I'm going to do a 12 pack every week with everyone. and that's the 12 games that we all select. But I then send all my predictions to Patreon in a separate post with what was 18 games last week. I just pick all the top 25 games and then any other games that interest me.
Gotcha. Yeah. Those sound like I've said it every week. Those sound like winning numbers, and I'm not a betting man myself, but those are definitely excellent numbers. And I do want to mention this before we log off, Mark. I've been, I don't want to call it teasing, but discussing the possibilities of launching an Iowa men's basketball post-game show this year. That is happening. All right. So if you haven't already subscribed to From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube, From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. That's where you can find our post-game shows for Iowa men's basketball games. Of course, a lot more games, so I can't guarantee every single game will be there. I'm going to try to do the best we can with that. Certainly, you can support us, and of course, learn more about how you can support us over at our channel. But I'll be making an announcement about our analyst that we'll be having on our show each and every game, or at least close to each and every game. We'll be making that announcement here in the coming hours, days, very soon. First exhibition game for Iowa basketball is this Friday against Slippery Rock. So they play Slippery Rock and they play Longwood. So it's a gauntlet start, Mark, but we'll be ready for it over From the Hawkeye of the Storm, and of course for all the football games moving forward right here at Iowa at the West College Football.
I will keep track of the Iowa basketball game through you.
Okay. Especially that game against Slippery Rock, right?
Yes, it's not exactly on my priority list. But
I will say this. Have you ever purchased BTN Plus?
I have not. No.
Okay. Because there's not really any reason to purchase it unless you're into something other than football, and you really don't follow any other sports, right, Mark?
I don't any longer. No.
So I'm anxious to see if there's any people on here that have subscribed to BTN Plus. Iowa men's basketball's got like 5 or 6 games in November and December on BTN Plus only. And I've bought it in past seasons because it's the only way to watch the games. And man, the customer service blows, and the quality has always stunk. And I'm just surprised that BTN can't figure out
the quality of the feed.
The feed sometimes, the feed will at least in past seasons, the feed crashes, or it's like lagging. And I even had a problem resetting my password because I don't use it, but 2 months out of the year I subscribe for 2 months, which is actually not too expensive to do that. But I had a problem resetting my password, and there's no real way to get in touch with a customer service phone number, so you have to email them. And I don't know. It's just I'm glad that we don't have to do that for football. I'll say that.
I am off to talk some Michigan State Purdue for a few minutes, and then at 7 o'clock Eastern time on the main channel, everyone, we will be watching the college football playoff rankings unveiling together. If you want to join me there, and of course, catch all of Corey's work at From the Hawkeye of the Storm, and of course on our Iowa channel as well. All right, Corey, we will do it again next Tuesday. Every Tuesday, we're here talking Iowa football with all of you at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central, right here at the Voice of College Football. Corey, thank you so much. Enjoy the game on Saturday night, and we will be around for the post game to check in on you. And will Don be available on Saturday?
He absolutely will be. We'll be on right away because it's a road game. So he'll be jumping on about 9:30 following the Iowa Northwestern game.
All right, folks. Hope to see everyone in 25 minutes on the main channel. Otherwise, we will see you back here next week on Iowa Hawkeyes Live, and check out Corey and Don's work, obviously, after the Northwestern game on the post-game show. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Mark.